What if I told you that the truth doesn't always matter in a courtroom? That innocence isn't enough to keep you free, especially if you're a young black man in America. Jarrett Adams was just 17 years old when his entire life was stolen by a system that was never designed to protect him. No evidence, no real defense, just a conviction that came faster than the blink of an eye. And yet, he did the impossible. From a prison cell, with nothing but a law book and sheer determination, he fought back. Not just for himself, but for everyone the system tried to erase. How does a convicted man become the lawyer who takes on the very system that tried to bury him? Stay with me, because this story isn't just about injustice. It's about redemption, resilience, and turning pain into power. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at the justice system the same way again. It was one of those nights that felt like freedom. The kind where the air is thick with music, laughter spills into the streets, and the world seems wide open. 17-year-old Jarrett Adams sat in the passenger seat of his friend's car, his sneakers tapping against the floorboard as they cruised toward a college party in Wisconsin. For a kid from Southside Chicago, stepping into that campus was like entering a different world. The air smelled of cheap beer and excitement, students spilling. Onto the lawn, music pulsing through the walls of the dormitory. He wasn't thinking about the future. He was living in the moment. Inside, the party was electric. Jarrett, tall and lean, with short, neatly cropped hair and deep brown eyes, moved through the crowd, soaking in the energy. Laughter, conversations, the occasional bump of shoulders in the crowded space. It was just another night, or so he thought. Hours passed. The music softened, the party thinned. Then the police arrived. At first it felt like a misunderstanding, just routine, maybe a noise complaint. But the moment a girl pointed her finger, everything changed. She told the officers she had been assaulted, said it happened that night, said it was Jarrett and his friends. The weight of her words crushed the air from his lungs. He barely had time to process it before he was in handcuffs, the cold steel biting his wrists. He kept saying the same thing over and over. "I didn't do anything. This isn't right." The officers barely looked at him. To them, he wasn't a kid anymore. He was just another black boy in trouble. The ride to the police station was a blur. The fluorescent lights, the fingerprinting, the mugshot. It all happened too fast, like a movie where he wasn't the main character but a side note, a statistic. Hours turned into days, and reality sank in. The accusation stood. The girl's story shifted, her details blurred, but none of it seemed to matter. The legal system had its own momentum, and Jarrett was caught in its undertow. He kept thinking about his mother, how she'd break when she saw him behind bars, how his dreams, college, basketball, a future, had vanished in an instant. The night that started with music and laughter had stolen everything from him. The courtroom smelled like old paper and cold air, the kind of place where the walls absorbed too many broken lives, where freedom was either granted or stolen in the time it took for a gavel to fall. Jarrett sat at the defense table, wearing an oversized suit that didn't quite fit, the fabric bunched around his wrists, swallowing his hands like he was a child playing dress-up. But this wasn't a game. He glanced toward the wooden benches where his mother sat, clutching a tissue so tightly it looked like she was trying to hold herself together. Her eyes, red from sleepless nights, locked onto his. She wanted to believe this was just a mistake, that the system would correct itself, that justice would prevail. But Jarrett already knew the truth. The prosecutor, a man in a crisp navy suit, white, confident, sure of himself, stood and addressed the jury like a storyteller weaving a tale. Except this story was a lie. "The defendant," he said, his voice dripping with certainty, "took advantage of a young woman. He thought he could get away with it. But tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we show him otherwise." Jarrett's stomach twisted. His court-appointed lawyer barely spoke, barely objected. When he did, it was weak, like throwing pebbles at a brick wall. He never questioned why there was no physical evidence, why the girl's story had changed multiple times, why his alibi, his two friends, had been ignored. No one cared. To the jury, an all-white panel staring at him like he was already guilty. Jarrett wasn't a teenager, wasn't a son, wasn't a kid with dreams. He was a black boy in Wisconsin, standing trial for a crime he didn't commit. He clenched his fists under the table as he watched the girl on the stand. She couldn't meet his eyes. Her voice trembled, and sometimes she hesitated, like she wasn't sure what she was supposed to say next. But it didn't matter. The trial barely lasted. 3 days. 3 days to dismantle his entire life. When the jury returned, the room fell into a hush so thick he could hear his own pulse pounding in his ears. He kept his back straight, his face calm, like his mother had told him to. "Jarrett Adams, we find you guilty." The words hit like a hammer to his chest. His mother's cry shattered the silence. The judge barely looked at him when he spoke. 28 years, 28. His body felt disconnected, numb, as they cuffed him. The metal was tighter this time, final. As they led him away, he turned back. One last time. His mother had collapsed against the bench, sobbing, her whole body shaking, and in that moment, as the door closed behind him, he realized something that sent ice through his veins. The truth had never mattered. The first thing that hit Jarrett when he stepped inside Oshkosh Correctional Institution wasn't the noise or the smell of sweat and steel. It was the weight. The air inside felt thick, like it was pressing down on his chest, squeezing the breath out of him. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a number, an inmate, another young black man lost in the system. The guard shoved a rough orange jumpsuit into his hands, barking orders like he wasn't even there. "Move, strip, hands against the wall." He followed every command. Not because he was weak, but because he knew what happened to guys who resisted on their first day. Prison wasn't a place for pride, it was a place for survival. The first night in his cell was the longest of his life. The metal bed frame dug into his back. The thin mattress did nothing to stop the cold from seeping into his bones. The walls were covered in scratched names, numbers, desperate messages from men who had come before him. He stared at the ceiling, eyes burning. 28 years. He tried to picture it, but his mind refused. He was 18. By the time he got out, if he got out, he would be middle-aged, a stranger in his own life. "I don't belong here." But that didn't matter. He was here. And no one was coming to save him. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He learned the unspoken rules fast. Keep your head down, don't ask questions, never show weakness. But prison had a way of testing you. It happened in the yard. A fight broke out near the fence. 2 guys throwing wild punches, blood splattering on the concrete. Jarrett kept walking like he didn't see it. That was rule number 1. But someone was always watching. That night in the chow hall, a group of older inmates blocked his path. One of them, a guy with a face full of scars, leaned in. "You scared, kid?" Jarrett met his eyes, didn't flinch, didn't answer. The man smirked, shoving him hard enough that his tray crashed to the floor. Food splattered. Across his boots, laughter, stares, a silent test. Jarrett knew he had a choice, fight and prove himself, or get labeled weak. He took a breath, made his decision. Before the man could say another word, Jarrett swung, a clean hit to the jaw. The man stumbled back, shocked. For a moment everything was still. Then the guards were there, breaking it up, slamming them to the ground, barking orders. That night, Jarrett sat on his cot, bruised, staring at the wall. He hadn't wanted to fight. But in here, it wasn't about what you wanted. It was about survival. This wasn't the life he was supposed to have. But if he was going to make it out, he had to find a way to do more than survive. He had to find a way to fight. The prison library wasn't much. Dusty shelves, torn pages, a flickering light overhead that buzzed like an old street lamp. But it was the only place where Jarrett felt like he could breathe. He had spent months learning how to move inside these walls. Survival had become second nature, but surviving wasn't enough, not when every morning he woke up in a cell meant for someone who had actually committed a crime. The thought burned. One afternoon, he ran his fingers across the spines of the books, not really looking for anything, just trying to quiet his thoughts. Then his hand stopped, a thick blue hardcover, Criminal Law and Procedure. He pulled it down, flipping through the pages, and what he saw made his heart pound. There it was, a case. Just like his, a man wrongly convicted because his lawyer had failed to defend him properly. His breath caught. I didn't have a defense. The words swirled in his head. His public defender had barely tried. No evidence had ever placed him at the scene. The only thing that put him behind bars was a story, one that kept changing. His pulse quickened as he turned the pages. Legal jargon filled the text, words he didn't understand, but he kept reading. And for the first time since he had walked through those prison gates, hope flickered inside him. That night he didn't sleep. He read until his eyes burned, tracing every line with his finger, mouthing the words like a prayer. Precedent, habeas corpus, ineffective counsel. Terms that had once meant nothing were now his weapons. Days turned into weeks, and the library became his battlefield. He copied legal arguments by hand, writing until his fingers ached. He begged for more books. He studied past cases. Soon, other inmates started noticing. They asked him for help. "Yo, Adams, you think you could check my case?" At first, it was just a few, then more. Jarrett wasn't just reading for himself anymore, he was reading for all of them. One night, as he sat on his cot, papers spread out in front of him, a realization hit him like a gut punch. I'm not just gonna get out of here. I'm gonna fight! The walls of his cell were covered in papers. Legal notes, case summaries, scribbled arguments written on whatever scraps he could find. Pages torn from old books, the backs of disciplinary reports, anything that would hold ink. Jarrett sat on the lower bunk, his knees drawn up, a pencil moving furiously in his hand. He wasn't just reading anymore. He was writing. He was building. The law had stolen his life. Now he was learning how to use it to take it back. Every night after the prison went quiet and the distant echoes of metal doors slamming had faded, he studied. He memorized cases, dissected rulings, traced legal arguments like they were battle plans. And then he started writing his own. The first motion he filed was a mess. Too many words, not enough clarity. It got rejected before it even reached a judge. But instead of breaking him, it ignited something deeper. "All right," he muttered under his breath, pacing the small space of his cell. "Let's try again." His cellmate, an older man named Reggie, watched from the top bunk, shaking his head. "You really think they're gonna listen to you, kid?" Jarrett didn't hesitate. "They don't have a choice." Reggie chuckled. "Man, you got fire in you. Let's hope that paper can burn down these bars." Months passed. He wrote, he rewrote, he studied every rejection, every denied motion, every loophole he had missed. One day, another inmate slid into the seat across from him in the library. Big guy, face covered in years of scars. "I heard you helping people," he said, voice low. Jarrett glanced up. "Depends. What's your case?" The man hesitated. Then he pulled out a file. That was how it started. First one case, then another and another. Jarrett became the prison's lawyer. Guys who had lost all hope started coming to him. Some were guilty, just looking for a way to shave down their sentences. But some, like him, had been swallowed by a system that never saw them as human in the first place. He sat with them, asked questions their real lawyers had never bothered to ask. He pulled files, dug through legal loopholes, built arguments piece by piece. It wasn't just about getting himself out anymore. It was about fighting back. Then, one night, as he sat under the dim prison light flipping through an old case file, he found it. The flaw, the crack in the foundation of his own conviction. He read the line over and over, his pulse racing. Ineffective assistance of counsel. His lawyer had failed him. The system had failed him. But now he had the weapon he needed. Jarrett grabbed a blank sheet of paper, and he started writing the motion that could set him free. The letter came on a cold morning, slipped through the bars of his cell like it was just another piece of mail. Jarrett stared at it for a long moment before picking it up, his fingers tense, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. The envelope was from the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. This was it. He had spent years fighting for this, years of late nights, endless rejections, rewriting arguments until his hands ached. He had learned the system inside and out, dissecting every detail of his case like a surgeon trying to save his own life. Now the answer was in his hands. His cellmate, Reggie, sat up on the top bunk, watching. "Well, damn, kid, you gonna open it or frame it?" Jarrett exhaled sharply and ripped the envelope open. His eyes scanned the first lines, then the second. Then his hands started shaking. "The conviction of Jarrett Adams is hereby overturned on the grounds of ineffective assistance of counsel." He read it again and again. Then suddenly, the room felt too small, too loud, too unreal. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe. Reggie jumped down from the bunk. "No way," he whispered, grabbing the letter. He read it once, his eyes going wide. Then he let out a loud, wild laugh. "You're getting out, man!" The words hit him like a punch to the chest. Freedom. The walls around him, the ones that had boxed him in for nearly 10 years, were about to disappear. But when the day finally came, when the guards led him down that long hallway toward the exit, his body felt heavier than ever. He had walked into this prison as a teenager. Now he was leaving as a man. The doors groaned open, and for the first time in a decade, he stepped outside without chains on his wrists. The sun was blinding. The air smelled different, like possibility, and standing by the gate, waiting for him, was his mother. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She just pulled him into her arms and held on like she would never let go again. And for the first time in years, Jarrett let himself believe that this wasn't a dream. Freedom wasn't what he expected. Jarrett had spent nearly 10 years behind bars, and now, standing in the middle of Chicago, the city felt different. Too loud, too fast, too unfamiliar. His mother had done everything she could to make his return feel normal. His childhood bedroom untouched, his favorite meal waiting on the table, family dropping by to welcome him home. But he wasn't the same person who had left. He sat on the edge of his bed that first night, staring at the walls, his hands gripping the mattress like he was afraid he'd wake up back in a cell. He was free, but what did that even mean? The world had moved on without him. Technology had changed. People had changed. His friends had jobs, families, lives. And him? He had a decade-long gap in his life story. Every time he walked into a store, every time he saw a police car, his body tensed, a habit he couldn't shake. But there was one thing he knew with certainty. He had won his case because he fought for it. And now he wanted to fight for others. So he did something that no one expected. He applied to law school. At first, people laughed. A former inmate? A lawyer? Some said he was dreaming too big. Others said the system would never let him in. But Jarrett didn't care. He had spent years learning the law behind bars. Now he was going to master it. The first day of class at Loyola University Chicago School of Law felt surreal. He walked into the lecture hall wearing a crisp button-up shirt. One of the few he owned. The professor started talking, words filling the space like an ocean wave, but all Jarrett could think about was how much he had fought to be in that seat. Other students took notes casually, flipping through their textbooks. Jarrett gripped his pen like a weapon. He wasn't just here to pass, he was here to change everything. And so he worked, harder than anyone. Long nights, early mornings. Every case study was personal, every discussion was fuel. While others went out for drinks after class, he stayed behind, flipping through legal books, the same way he had done in prison. But the real test came during a class discussion on wrongful convictions. The professor posed a question. How does it feel to be falsely accused? Can the system ever fully correct its mistakes? Students debated back and forth, throwing out statistics, legal theories, hypothetical scenarios. Jarrett listened. Then finally he spoke. It feels like dying with your eyes open. The room went silent. Every head turned toward him. Some had heard his story. Others were just now realizing who he was. He took a breath, his voice steady. The system doesn't just steal time. It steals trust. It steals your sense of self. And when you finally get out, it expects you to be grateful for the freedom that was never supposed to be taken from you in the first place. No one said a word. For the first time, he wasn't just a former inmate trying to fit in. He was the man who had lived the reality they were studying. And in that moment, he knew he wasn't just here to get a degree. He was here to make sure no one else had to live what he had survived. The first time Jarrett walked into a courtroom as a lawyer, he felt it. That weight, that same air, thick with judgment, with decisions that could shatter lives in an instant. But this time, he wasn't the one sitting at the defense table. He was standing, and someone else's future was in his hands. The client was a young black man, 19 years old, facing a charge that could ruin his life before it even started. The evidence was weak. The story was full of holes. But Jarrett knew how this worked. He had seen it too many times. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong color. The prosecutor spoke first, the same confident tone Jarrett had heard at his own trial all those years ago. The same carefully crafted words designed to turn a human being into a statistic. Jarrett's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he took a breath, steadied himself, and when he stood to speak, he made sure they heard him. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as it was designed to. He let the words settle in the room. Then he did what no one had done for him back then. He fought. He challenged every inconsistency, exposed every gap in the prosecution's case, made the jury see his client as a person, not a number. And when the verdict came back, not guilty, he felt something deep in his chest. It wasn't just about winning. It was about undoing the damage, one case at a time. Word spread fast. The kid who had defended himself in prison was now a force in the courtroom. More cases came. Some were easy wins, wrongful convictions with obvious mistakes, the kind that should have never happened in the first place. Others were battles. But Jarrett didn't back down. Ever. He knew the stakes, every man he defended. He saw himself in them, the ones who had lost faith, the ones who thought no one would fight for them, the ones who had already been judged before they even walked into the courtroom. But he was there now. And as long as he had breath in his body, he wasn't going to let the system do to them what it had done to him. The courtroom felt exactly the same, the polished wooden benches, the judge's high seat, the murmurs of lawyers flipping through case files. Everything was unchanged, except for one thing. This time, Jarrett wasn't the one in the defendant's chair. He stood tall, dressed in a dark suit, his legal pad in hand. He belonged here now, but as he scanned the room, his stomach twisted, because he knew this place. This was the same courtroom where, years ago, he had been sentenced to 28 years for a crime he didn't commit. The air felt thick. He could almost hear the judge's voice from back then, could still feel the cold metal of the cuffs as they dragged him away. His fingers tightened around the pen in his hand. Not today. Today he was here to defend another young black man, just like him, accused with no evidence, left to the mercy of a system that didn't care. The prosecutor, an older white man with silver hair, barely looked at him as he presented his case. Same tone, same tricks, same story. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The victim identified him. The law is clear. Jarrett had heard it all before, but this time he had the power to tear it apart. He stood and approached the jury, his voice steady. My client is innocent. Not because of a loophole, not because of a technicality, but because he is. Jarrett showed them the inconsistencies, the contradictions, the missing pieces no one had bothered to question. He made them see the human being sitting at that table, just as he had once sat there, waiting for justice that never came. The jury deliberated for hours, and when they returned, Jarrett held his breath. Not guilty. His client broke down in tears. His mother clutched his hand. The weight in Jarrett's chest cracked just a little. One more life saved. As he packed his briefcase, he looked around the room one last time. This place had once stolen his freedom. But now, it was where he took it back. For himself and for everyone who came after him. Late at night, in a small office filled with stacks of case files, Jarrett Adams sat at his desk, staring at a name. Another young man, another wrongful conviction, another life stolen by a system that wasn't built to protect him. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. The weight of it all never got lighter. Every case he took was a reminder of the years he lost, of the nights he spent in a cold prison cell, dreaming of the day he'd be free, of the moment he realized freedom wasn't enough. He had to fight. The phone on his desk rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. He picked it up. Adams' law office. A voice on the other end, another desperate mother, another son facing trial, another life in limbo. They said he did it, but he didn't. Please, can you help? Jarrett closed his eyes for a second, then leaned forward. Tell me everything. Because this was his purpose now. Not just proving innocence, not just winning cases, but making sure no one else had to survive what he had, and as long as he had breath in his body, he would keep fighting, one case at a time, one life at a time. Jarrett Adams didn't just fight for his freedom. He turned his pain into purpose. But here's the real question. How many other innocent people are still trapped in a system that was never built to protect them? How many lives are being stolen right now because no one is fighting for them? Now I want you to think about this. What would you do if the system turned against you? If no one believed you? If your voice was silenced? Because the truth is, this isn't just Jarrett's story. This is a reality for thousands of people. So let's talk. What do you think needs to change in the justice system? Do you believe one person can truly make a difference? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, start the conversation, and let's keep exposing the truth. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Because the more we learn, the more we can fight back. See you in the next video.